Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of the new graphic novel, The Knives, at Image Comics, and the soon-to-be-released hardcover collection of Friday over at Image, as well as the showrunner of the upcoming Amazon Prime series, Criminal. It's Ed Brubaker. Thanks for coming on, Ed.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Ed, we have to start with the most important topic that we'll get to today. You have been doing a lot lately, it seems, as you wrap up the show, work on other media projects, and have unknown, untold comic book projects building up. Are you surviving? How are you doing?
It's funny. You hear a lot of showrunners say you have no life while you're running a TV show, and that's pretty true. I did manage to, still write graphic novels for Sean, and I actually have another thing that I wrote for Marcos that he's just starting to work on that's like top secret. But yeah, it's very it's insanely busy. I mean, we're towards the end of post finally with Criminal, but yeah, it is a hell of a workload. I feel like I've spent 2 years making one season of TV, basically.
I know I think you were in Portland when I was doing a podcast with Kelly Sue DeConnick last year. And I know you went and visited with Kelly Sue and with Matt Fraction.
Yeah.
Did you ever kind of commiserate with Matt? Because he was one of the main folks on the Monarch Legacy of Monsters show.
Yeah.
Did you ever kind of commiserate about the comic book / showrunner overlap and kind of what that entails and how you balance that all?
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually kind of funny. The first 2 months or so that I was living up there, I lived in Portland for most of last year because that's where we did production for the show.
Right.
The first couple months that I was there, I lived in an apartment over Brian Bendis's garage.
Nice.
And Matt and Kelly Sue live around the corner, and it was just it was honestly the only way that I could have survived that, because my wife wasn't there yet, my dog wasn't there yet. And I was basically jumping into the deep end on prep and production in a foreign city. I'd never done production outside of LA before, and so Westworld was LA, Santa Clarita, and the Refn show was all LA. So the idea of being away from home for the majority of a year, and prepping for 3 or 4 months and then shooting all year, it was completely it was insane. It was like going from working at home to working retail or something. You're just forced to deal with hundreds of people all the time. And yeah, but it was overwhelming. So I would go home every night, and there's an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment over Brian's garage. And I jokingly asked him before, when I was going to have to move up there, I'm like, hey, do you have a guest cottage or something I can crash at? And he's like, yeah, we have an apartment over the garage. I'm like, of course you do. so I lived there, and it was like the old days. It was like Brian and I came up in comics together. We were at Caliber together back in the day. And, I owe so much of my career to Brian, I feel like. And so I would wander down into his house at 10:30, 11 at night after his family was all asleep, and just hang out with him in his office while he's working, and we're watching movies and playing video. It was just totally a blast. It was the only way to survive those first couple of months and get used to, the transition into being a showrunner, basically, which is, a lot different than sitting at home and writing comics.
I mean, it is kind of funny. It's a blend of different points in your life and your career where probably when you're in your 20s and you're coming up and you're writing and drawing comics, with Bendis, back then he was writing and drawing comics too.
Yeah.
You're coming up and you're with all these people that are comic peers and everything like that. And then you go off to work, and your work is managing this set of hundreds of people and trying to keep everybody on track and herding cats and doing all this stuff like that. And it's kind of a fascinating blend of your past and present in a very intense way, I imagine.
Yeah. I would try to get my friends to come out to set, just to see it, because it was so crazy, all the stuff we were shooting. And Brian and his son London came and hung out for an afternoon. Matt came and hung out one night. It was just a lot of fun bringing people out to see the set of The Undertow, which we had built. So yeah, it was really fun, honestly. It took me a few weeks to sort of get used to the whole, that every day would there be just like a ton of new people to deal with. But like by the end of it, I was like dying to get back to, whatever season 2 is, basically, of just like get all these people back together and do it again.
Was there anything that surprised you about show running a series versus being one of the voices on the set? Because I mean, you're going from like, I can always talk to somebody else about this to the
Y-
buck stops with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Surprise. There was a lot of, I feel like almost nothing in the job until like ADR was how I pictured it would be. Like every aspect of it was different than I imagined. And I have a lot of showrunner friends, and I won't name them here, but I would text them every now and then for advice. And I'm like, hey, it kind of seems like not everybody wants to defer to what I want. That would be the way. And he's like, my friend was like, oh, hilarious. No, you have to tell them what you want over and over again. I was like, oh, great. So it was like, it was just little things like just learning to be comfortable, like telling people what you want, actually, and trying to find the line between letting artists be artists and going, hey, that's not what we're trying to do here, we need to do this. And like it's really interesting as the showrunner. Like I knew going in, like when you're the showrunner, you basically rewrite everything like constantly. Like you rewrite the scripts before they're turned in. Like even if your name, any show you've ever watched, if the showrunner's name isn't on the scripts themselves, they've still probably rewritten like half of that script, if not like a third or maybe even all of it. It depends on the script, really, and it depends on the schedule, and it depends on did the studio demand a last minute rewrite? There's so many aspects that go into it. And like on the Batman show that I did right before this, like, I did rewriting on a lot of the scripts. And so I knew going in that it was just going to be like that. And when I worked with Refn, it was like we were constantly rewriting everything all the way through production. Like he just would go insane and get tired of like a scene that I thought was totally fine and call me up at like 11 o'clock at night and be like, we have to come into the office and work on this. This scene tomorrow is boring. We need to fix it somehow. And so, me and Hallie, would meet him in the office and we work until 3 a.m. rewriting a scene that I thought was totally fine. And that, but that he creatively had just gotten bored with because he'd been looking at it 100 times for the last 2 weeks. So like there's always that kind of stuff. But like just the sheer amount of changes that happen after production. Like I had lunch with this like writer director friend because we're on the Warner Brothers lot for post. So I'm like at the commissary all the time and run into like filmmakers that I know and stuff. And I had lunch one day with this filmmaker who's like kind of a mentor for me sometimes. And I was just telling him, I was like, I had no idea. Like when you're in post, sometimes you're looking at an episode and you're like, you know what? These scenes are not in the right order, actually. We need to move this, this, and this, and then we need to change this dialogue to say this so that that makes sense. And he was like, oh, yeah, no, the writing the script and making the show is like, he's like, that's the easy part. And he's like, production, he's think of it this way. It's like writing the script and then making it. That's like making all your ingredients. And post, when you're editing it and doing the sound and everything, that's when you need to be like the greatest chef in the world and you're putting the meal together. He's like,
Right.
so everything changes at that point. And I was like, oh fuck. So that was like the biggest learning experience of it, was just like the ups and downs of post and sort of finding the voice of the show. And like I would say like all the voiceover in Coward was stuff that I ended up writing in post, almost everything that's there, except for like the very opening one, which was like in the pilot script. And then like probably 80% of the voiceover that's in Lawless was stuff that I ended up writing in post or rewriting in post from what it was originally. And just scenes move around, structure changes, like stuff like that. And like being that person there who's like in the edit room with the editors, like going through all this and like dealing with the studio notes and the score. And like that's kind of the place that I'm at right now, is we're like in the mixes and dealing with the score and the Foley and all that stuff, and looking at special effects, which are amazing because we have the team from Shogun doing all of our special effects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the show is insanely, like, it came out insanely good. Like, I'm in the tank for it because I'm the showrunner and creator of it, and I also created the comics. But like Sean's art is all over the show. Like, I can't talk about some of it, but like, man, when people see the first couple episodes, they're just going to be blown away by how much like it feels like the comics and the world of the comics. And but also there's just so many amazing like surprises and stuff coming. I wish I could tell you everything. That like one that just happened the other day that just blew my mind, just like big things kind of falling into place for us. So
That's awesome. Sean got to visit the set too, right?
yeah, Sean spent a week out there. Sean and his wife flew out, and yeah, he did a lot of drawings for people too, like little like wrap gift drawings for people. Like I made him do little muck shots of all the writers' room staff, and various people on the production, and some of the cast and directors and stuff.
That's all. I love that. I love that. I did want to ask about something that I think is fascinating about this because you like your book that's coming out the week that this podcast is going up is The Knives, and it's a
Yeah,
criminal story. And then you also in the afterword of that you talk about how one of your next books is you're doing a Ricky Lawless book,
yeah,
also a criminal.
yeah,
And so you have criminal comics happening concurrently to working on the show.
yeah.
Has it been weird to have a show version of Criminal in your head on top of the comic version, or is there enough overlap that it doesn't become weird at all?
No, it's not weird for me. I think it was weird for other people sometimes that I would be like, no, this is what it is. And they'd be like, well, that's what it is in the books. I'm like, well, yeah, but I created this too. So I'm saying it's
Right.
that here as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, so for me, it's just like, there's some things where like dates for things will be different. Like when things happened might be a little bit different. Though Cruel Summer still takes place in the summer of 1988. Like if we do that in the show. But like Ricky is in the show. Whereas
Mhm.
if you read the first two books, like Ricky in the world of the books, like Ricky didn't appear in the books until like right before Cruel Summer, really. Like,
Yeah. I
Rick,
mean, he's dead in the Lawless
yeah,
arc, isn't he?
and Coward. Like on the first couple pages of Coward, you find out that Leo used to have a friend named Ricky who's dead.
Right.
So, and I decided he was such a vibrant, like interesting character that I was like, you know what? It's the TV show, not the comic, so Ricky can be a character. And we got the most amazing actor to play Ricky Lawless. Oh my God, this guy Gus Halper, who he's like, I can't wait till people see this. It's like when people saw Robert De Niro in Mean Streets for the first time. They're
Oh,
just,
wow.
oh my God, who is this guy? And he's been around on stuff before, but yeah, he knocks everybody out in this show. It's insane.
I mean, I think that that's the interesting thing about the two different formats is, I know people compare comics and TV shows, like they're both
Yeah,
sequential art in a way. And I think that each has their own strengths. And that's the thing that I think is interesting about you being able to do this. It'd be like if Lee Child did like the Reacher series after writing the book, because you get to look at your own project in a different medium
yeah,
and think, how would I ever, or like, how could I enhance this overall project by like adding this flavor here? Or like in the
yeah.
case of Ricky, it's an interesting little wrinkle that you kind of have been afforded to look at your project from a different, prism in a way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm always more interested in the stuff that is different that I can do because I already wrote the books,
Right.
like, and like the format that we're doing for the show, like the first season is two like 4 episode stories that take place, that tell complete stories just like what the books do. So it's like the books are sort of a template for how the show is, unfolding, at least in the first season. And, but moving beyond the first season, I also feel now like I have enough material in the books. It's like I can take pieces from one book and pieces from another and like, put them together and make something that feels a little bit different, but still of the world. For me, the biggest challenge for season one is this is really the first thing of mine that's ever been like directly adapted, and but there's been a lot of scripts written based on our books before, like, you know, Kill or Be Killed, Incognito, you know, there's Coward even, you know, like a long time ago. Like there's been times where people have tried to turn them into movies, and amazing screenwriters, and like they've never quite gotten the voice of our work right. And I think that like that was it for me, of like why I was decided, like, because honestly the worst thing you could do as a writer would be to try to adapt your own material into a TV show or a movie, because the worst thing that you could ever do as like a creative person is be a showrunner on something you really care about, that you feel is your own self-expression.
Mhm.
I personally don't love talking about my creative process. I prefer to just, I like to move forward and just make things. Like that has been how Sean and I have built this career, is that we just didn't stop and worry about what people were saying about our books. We just kept making more books. And so for me, that part of the process is the hardest, of like having to deal with what people are saying about it, or people saying, oh, maybe you should do this, or should you try this? And having to learn to just be like, nope, that's not what I want to do. No. And like, and then putting the wall down of like, no, and we're done talking about it. Let's move on. Like that is like, it's difficult. But the fact is, like, I had Oscar nominated screenwriters like adapting my stuff before, and it ended up feeling like, I don't know how to describe it. It just didn't feel like me, you know?
Yeah.
Like it was missing like whatever the humanity part of what I do is. And if you just follow like the plots of what I do and you don't get the characters right, then the magic or whatever it is that is what me and Sean make, or what me and, you know, Marcos make, like that part can just be missing. And then it just sort of seems like anything else, you know, like I've seen scripts for some of my stuff that come in feeling like the Fast and the Furious, or John Wick or something, where you're just like, oh no, like I like those things. I mean, I love those things. And I, especially the first John Wick movie I love, but like like, and I've watched all the Fast and Furious movies a bunch of times, but that's not criminal, you know?
Right. Right.
And so finding that voice and making sure it felt like me, like that's why I was so willing to like go through like the misery of being a TV showrunner on Criminal, actually, because it is one of the hardest jobs you could ever have, and it's stressful and exhausting, and it eats up, you know, your every waking moment. But like it's such a hard job. But then there's been so many times where I like watch a playback, or you know, I'm sitting on set next to Dee Reese on an Apple box watching Amelia Clark do a monologue that's like the best performance of her entire career, you know, and I'm just like, holy fucking shit, I wrote that. Like,
That's awesome.
and you know, like honestly, we did like a week of reshoots in May in LA, actually. We just like did a bunch of interiors and disguised some exteriors. And I actually directed second unit on that. So like in the first 4 episodes, there's little pieces here and there that I actually directed even. So it's like I really feel my hand all over this thing. And you know, like I directed an action scene with Charlie Hunnam. Like that's pretty fucking cool. Yeah. I mean, they don't stand out when you're watching the show. You should, it just, you know, it's like anytime second unit's just supposed to look identical. But yeah, it's just fun. And so there were just so many times where all the pain was worth it. And now that the show is done, and hopefully there'll be news coming out about it soon and stuff. But, you know, it was just so rewarding for the amount of pain that I went through, and the amount of times where it was just so out of my wheelhouse of like, why does everybody else get to have an opinion? And I'm like, oh yeah, because it's their money.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. As one of the most innovative comic publishers, Vault Comics has released some of the most exciting independent comics of the past 10 years. Vault's current lineup includes a murderer's row of titles like Post Malone's brand new comic series Big Rig, Money Shot Big Bang by Patton Oswalt, Tim Seeley, and Garth Graham, and the hit sapphic shenanigans of Corn Howell's Lilith, all of which are available at your local comic shop. Vault's backlist boasts a who's who of comic creators, many of whom have been guests on this very podcast, including titles from the likes of Rom V, Cy Spurrier, Christopher Cantwell, Tim Seeley, Aaron Campbell, Liana Kangas, and many more. Vault is even giving off-panel listeners 10% off on orders of Vault titles from www.vaultcomics.com by using the code OFFPANEL, that's one word, at checkout. So go to Vault's website and use the code OFFPANEL at checkout for 10% off your entire order. And now, back to the show. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to introduce The Knives, which is your new graphic novel with the Phillipses, Sean and Jacob, with Sean drawing and lettering and Jacob coloring it. I'm going to do the solicit. I'm going to tie this back into what you're saying, I swear. Here's the solicit. 3 dark journeys wind around each other over a decade like sharks hunting for a kill. Cartoonist Jacob Kurtz goes to Hollywood in the era of peak TV to work on an adaptation of his comic strip, only to find himself caught up in the life of his aging aunt and the vultures circling her estate. Angie was raised in the undertow, but now everything she loves has been taken from her. She's on the streets with vengeance on her mind, her eyes on the city's kingpin. And finally, Tracy Lawless is home from the special forces, finally a civilian again, but he's in bad shape, and this city has always brought out the worst in him. These 3 tales collide in The Knives, a breathtaking noir story about greed, ambition, heartbreak, and blood ties. I've read it. I've already told you. I read it originally in May, and I'll say out loud what I told you via email. I think this might be my favorite thing that you and Sean have done together. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I do want to bring up something that ties into what you were just talking about. Jacob Kurtz takes his comic strip to Hollywood and finds that they remove a lot of the black humor and a lot of the kind of satirical elements that make the comic the comic. It kind of takes the heart out of the book. I don't know. That sounds familiar, Ed. How much of this book was, I mean, maybe just the Jacob parts, but how much of it was you kind of navigating some experiences from your own life?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I don't have Jacob's experience there. The only part of it that's probably tracks with my own like early years and like when I moved down to Hollywood. Like I'd done like 3 or 4 TV pilots when I lived in Seattle, and I would just like fly down for meetings and pitch ideas. And so I'd sold like 3 or 4 pilots before I moved to LA, but like I moved down to LA to work on a movie and to work with Refn, and ended up doing a couple TV pilots and working with a couple different producers. And one of them, there was this time we sold Velvet to NBC, and then they came back and pitched what they wanted me to change Velvet to. And I said, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not. So I said, but I can do that idea, but not call it Velvet if you want. And they were like, okay. And then I was like, okay, well then you're not optioning my book. And then I just like wrote this pilot that I just fucking hated. And there was this sense at the time, I was just like kind of ashamed that I had just like gone out and tried to like hustle. And I don't know, there was some part of me that was like, felt dirty about that. Like, well, I don't want to do that as Velvet, but I'll write that as this other thing. And it was so, I remember being like 10 pages in and going, well, this isn't even my idea. This is their thing. They just wanted more. They just wanted something like Moonlighting.
Yeah.
I pitched Velvet and they pitched it back to me as like, what if she's like a young agent who's helping the man? And this is women who were pitching this to me, by the way. This was
It's just wild. It's wild.
A bunch of middle-aged women going, we're not sure if we can get this middle-aged woman TV show on. And it was like, wow, okay. But so some of that era was slightly influential on that first chapter, but really the stuff about the ant was really the only part that really came from my real life. I just kind of wanted to imagine what Jacob is like the most anxiety ridden part of me. Like Leo and Ricky and Jacob are all sort of different parts of me, I think. Leo's kind of like the idealized version of what I wish I could be or something, in a way, like super cool, doesn't get upset, can pickpocket people, perfect heist planner, like, all this shit, like just takes no shit kind of guy. And Ricky's like the fuck up, side of me. And Jacob is like the anxious guy who'd rather just be home drawing comics, like I wanted to sort of explore what a post-nervous breakdown Jacob would be like in Hollywood at that time. And also, like, you probably noticed, it's a Kafkaesque story about Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah,
He doesn't wake up as a cockroach. He wakes up as a TV writer, having
yeah.
completely lost his own compass. And that was really part of it. Was like, I think when I was writing that, I was really fighting hard not to lose my own compass, because I was, getting notes from the studio. I was getting notes from directors. I was getting notes from actors. I was getting notes from, at the time, my co-showrunner. Like there was this, everybody had opinions, like everybody has their own agenda. And, when you're the person at the top of the totem pole, learning how to manage that and sort of, I really wanted everybody to feel like they were all just a big part of the process, and it was like this thing we were all doing together. And I realized that there are hierarchies for reasons, like in things like this, where there's just this many moving parts. Somebody has to, like, I always just said as a joke, like, art isn't a democracy,
Hmm.
and it just isn't. Like, maybe democracy isn't a democracy anymore, who knows. But definitely art isn't a democracy, and a TV show isn't a democracy. Like, at the end of the day, the person who's fighting with the studio over the vision of the show is the showrunner, and you're either caving or you're fighting, or you're explaining your side of why you want to do the thing that you do and getting them on board, which is the smartest way to go, as opposed to just fighting with them, because y- they're your partners. They're like funding this thing. They obviously, you just have to constantly remind them of the things that they loved about it. And first season show too, like, they're like, every network or studio is always much more hands-on with the first season show, with the first season showrunner. Like, I was like co-showrunner on the Refn thing, but that was Refn. Nobody's assuming that I'm going to be like acting like Nicholas Refn. you know so it was that. I think when I started writing that book, like, that was kind of what I was going through, was like that losing your voice. And I sort of pitched like the darkest version of it to myself, of like, how would Jacob handle this? Because I'm much more capable of a person than Jacob. you know
He is a bit of a lovable disaster at times. I
yeah.
enjoy.
Oh no, yeah, he's great, but he's schizophrenic and has, mood disorders and on a lot of medication that I'm not on and stuff. So
I have to admit,
yeah.
there's three little Jacob bits that when I saw, and I don't want to get too much further into
Uh,
like the you overlapping, but the three bits where I was like, I feel like Ed really does not like the phrase IP. Um, I don't think that Ed likes people calling his comics graphic novels when they're comics. And I 100% believe that you could have made a zine with an article called 12 Reasons Why You Suck inside of it.
oh, that's
I'm
a
not.
scene from like 1992. That nasty thing. Yeah, that was me and Tom Hart and John Lewis.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that was the name of our zine. Was called That Nasty Thing. We did a zine where we spied on our roommates at a boarding house and secretly recorded their conversations. We were terrible people, but it was a hilarious zine because we lived in a boarding house with like a random assortment of people in the University District in Seattle. And it was nuts. But yeah, that's our actual zine. I like the term graphic novels, but I figured Jacob, as a person doing a comic strip, would be
Yeah.
mystified every time someone referred to it as a graphic novel. So I was kind of making fun of the idea that the way Hollywood, like, I've been going to Hollywood long enough that, like, I had the experience, like Brian Bendis and I had that similar experience where you'd show up for a meeting with like some producer at Sam Raimi's office or somewhere like that. And the producer's like, what's this meeting about? What are you, one of these comic book guys? Like, when I first started going there, like, the assistants read comics and they would tell people like, oh, you got to meet this guy. And so like Brian and I and a few other people were like those guys. And so you'd go down there and the people you're meeting with had never heard of you and hadn't looked at anything you did. But now all those assistants are like running companies. So like now it's like, if someone doesn't know who I am, I'm like, well, have you heard of the Winter Soldier? you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that pretty much does it. So
I wanted to talk about its origins. You talked about the suit or the ant already, and about how that was kind of like rooted, one of the core ideas of it. But one of the things that was interesting, I am curious if this is true. The afterward, it says you wrote the afterward in April 2024.
oh, That is an incorrect date. Someone found a typo in my book.
My bad. Okay, I was like, man, you've been done with this for a really long time. Either way,
Wow, that's hilarious. We can't fix that.
maybe in the second print. My bad. I didn't mean to point that out, but I am curious as to like you've been away from Criminal for a while now. You've been doing Reckless. You've been doing Where the Body Was. You've been doing House of the
Yeah.
Unholy. You've been doing things like that. What exactly inspired the return to Criminal? Was it just the show?
Yeah, I think just doing the TV show and figuring like, if I mean, look, I love the show, but even if the show were something that I ended up having not been super proud of, like it was going to be a big, slick, expensive commercial for my books. And, Robert is one of my best friends, so I know how I know enough to be doing Criminal when the Criminal TV show comes out.
Yeah.
But also I just had a bunch of ideas, like working on the show and like starting to work with the actors, and you talk to like the people in the writing staff and the producers and all of my crew, like they were all so into the books. They were all like reading the books, and fucking Kadeem Hardison, when he auditioned for the show, he like brought his fucking Criminal hardcovers and was like holding them up. He's like, please, you got to make me gnarly. I was like, so like people were so into the books, and people kept bringing them up to me on set to sign, and it was just like so overwhelming. And I just I suddenly was flooded with like ideas. I've got like ideas for like 5 or 6 more books. Like, though the thing actually after we're doing this Ricky book, which we're about halfway through right now, that'll come out probably early next year at this point. And then the thing we're doing after that is a new sort of off non-criminal thing. But then we'll probably come back and do some more criminal after that. But I just had an idea that I'm just kind of, that's nagging at me, and I'm like, all right, I guess I have to write that.
Did you always view, because the thing that's interesting about this book is it's like a triptych. It has the multiple leads. It has like the different chapters where you kind of have a focused character for each of them, where it's Angie and it's Jacob and it's Tracy, and you have these different characters. Did you always envision the Knives as this, like, I mean, I think it's the longest graphic novel you've ever done together.
Original one. Yeah. Cruel Summer as a story is like 100 pages longer, probably.
Okay.
But that was serialized over a year or 9 months.
So it's the longest like graphic novel original graphic novel you have. Did you always envision this as one story, or did you have kind of individual like narratives that you're like, these actually work really well together?
Oh, no, I came up with it all as one. I wanted to do like, especially after like Where the Body Was, which, I'm really proud of that book and how it has all these different stories that overlap and structurally, like plays with you a lot as a reader. And Cruel Summer, like every chapter in Cruel Summer is narrated, sort of like close third person narration from a different character's point of view, kind of like Game of Thrones or something. And so I think I'd been getting frustrated at the page length of the graphic novels that we'd been doing, and I really wanted to do something that I just didn't have to worry about how long it was as I was writing it. And so I just told Sean, I'm like, I have no idea how long this one's going to be. Like, and I think he was terrified.
He's like, great, thanks, Ed.
Yeah,
thanks.
it's like, so it's like, and there were times where I had to stop working on it for like a week or two because of the show, because I was so buried. But then Sean was doing art for stuff for the show, so he had stuff to keep him busy. But yeah, no, the idea always was to blend those 3 stories together. And also, like, it's the first criminal story that's gone beyond like My Hero
Left the City
Junkies takes place in like 2016, I think, or 2018, I think. But like none of the main characters' stories had ever gone anywhere up towards modern times. Like, because Coward takes place in like 2008 or something like that. And, so, and then a lot of those books take place in the past, so I just had this sense of like, Drew Pearce, who's a film writer, he wrote like the Iron Man 3 and one of the he wrote Hobbs and Shaw. He's written a bunch of movies. He's a friend of mine. And he asked one day, he's like, what's going to happen to that girl that grows up in the undertow?
Yeah.
This is like 10 years ago. And that just kind of nagged at me forever. And so I wanted to do a story that was like sort of about Jacob and Angie. And I realized early on that Tracy had a place in this story. And, they're all in the show. Like, so I kind of wanted to, like, the girl who plays Angie is, one of my favorite actors, this little kid, Aaliyah. And I just was kind of like, oh, I want to see what happens to her when she grows up. And I remember telling her that she was going to be a cat burglar. And then Jordan, seeing the smile on her face, was like, you don't steal cats. So it's like, oh, okay, what is it then? But yeah, I don't know. It was like a combination of working on the show and just sort of, just having a lot of ideas. I always have a notebook filled with like various criminal ideas, but some of them are like new characters. Like there's a couple of new characters coming. There was a story we did a couple years ago called Teague's Christmas Carol that was like a 70s thing about Teague, and it mentioned him having a sister. And there's like a whole other side to the Lawless family that we haven't met yet, that like the sister's kids. And I was like, oh, the Lawless cousins need to come back. Like,
I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about Criminal as like a narrative world, like as a place for you to write in, is the fact that like you can say like one thing and then it unlocks this entire side that you could just tell a story about, because that's what Criminal lets you do, right?
Yeah. That was always the idea. I mean, Frank Miller was like a mentor of mine early on. And when I started Criminal, I sent him like the first issues to look at because I wanted him to see it. And just also to say like, this is kind of like my version of Sin City, but instead of like, if Marv jumped out a window in Criminal and landed on a cop car, he'd die. That would be the end of the story. Then, and he was laughing about it, but then he got super into it. He's like, yeah, it's not like Sin City at all. He's like, it's like Parker or something. I was like, oh, it is like that. Like, but it feels so personal to me just because so many bits and pieces of my own life are in these characters. Like there's a scene in the show in the final episode of the season, a Tracy scene, and I've never been able to get through it in the edit without having like tears in my eyes, because to me it's so personal, and like every word that you're hearing is like something that's taken directly from my life and my past and in this one moment. And it's just, to me, I was just like, holy shit, it's like exercising your demons on screen, like, so Criminal has always just felt very to me, it compares more to like Love and Rockets than, Parker or something like that. Cause I just want to see what happens with these characters next, but they're all criminals. So there's plots, like,
I mean, I think
plots, but really it's like you rejoin these characters and you're like, oh, now they're 10 years older,
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Love sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and action? Then 2000 AD is the greatest comic you're not reading. 2000 AD has a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog through to Rogue Trooper, Zenith, Shakara, and many more. In every weekly issue, you get 5 action-packed stories from incredible creators including Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, and Dan Abnett. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive at your door every week, and your first issue is free. Or subscribe digitally, get free back issues, and download DRM free copies of each issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. And all subscribers get amazing offers like money off vouchers and exclusive products. Head to 2000AD.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app and start reading today. And now, back to the show. I do think that that's the interesting thing is like, it is called Criminal, but like it's not really purely about them being criminals. Like Jacob is just like living his life, and like Angie in her own way is just living her life. Like Tracy in his own way, this is like very much a like the knives is a journey for him figuring out what his life is supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I find that to be really interesting because it's like it's sure that they are criminals, but it isn't the thing that kind of defines them in a lot of ways, which I find to be a fascinating thing for a book called Criminal.
Yeah, well, that was always my intent, was that it's just the world that they live in. It's not,
Right.
they're like, this is why almost none of the stories are ever really about the mob boss people. Like, like I love The Sopranos. The Sopranos is probably the best TV show ever made, I think, but or debatably. But I'm not that interested in the people in the higher up positions, because I don't feel like that resonates with regular people on the same level. Like, it's different, like I was always more interested in Christopher, in a way, like these lower level guys who are under the pressure. But even that's like almost too inner circle. Like, whereas Criminal, like our characters are all the red shirts,
Right.
our world. Like they are blue collar as fuck. Like none of them are trying to plot their big last score before they retire forever. They're all, if they get a big score and go to the beach for a few months, that's it. They're coming back to their life after that and being like, okay, what's the next score? Like, and that's where it compares to Parker, which is like Parker does enough to live how he needs to live, and then he doesn't work for until he has to again, till the money starts to run out. Like, but that's a very blue collar kind of working man way to, I had somebody inside Amazon the other day say that Criminal appeals to the forgotten man. And I was like, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Like, I think Criminal has the same appeal as all those Taylor Sheridan shows, really. It's just, it's not one of them.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. It's like you were talking about Kadeem Hardison and being like, I really want to play gnarly. And like the
Yeah.
thing is even beyond that, it's like you have like I'm never gonna be able to see myself in like Tony Soprano, but I could see myself in like Ricky Lawless, or I could see
Yeah.
myself in Tracy Lawless, even to some degree. I had a very dark side when I was like 5 years old, Ed. I know that's really hard to believe. My parents thought that I wouldn't be able to go to school because I was
Like
such a
Frozen.
rageaholic. I got over it though. I do want to bring up one thing that I think is interesting related to the cast of the book. I don't want to get into it because it's the end of the book, but I think that where Tracy's story ends is very interesting in particular because it kind of feels like it's the type of plot point where it feels like it's something you've been building to this entire time. I mean, obviously, like there was the question about what happened to Angie that you got from Drew
Yeah.
Pierce, I believe it was, but do you have the timelines for these characters figured out to some degree, or is it largely making them up when you need to?
Honestly, it's a little bit of both. Like I knew how that story was going to end, but I didn't know until I started writing it, like that Tracy twist at the end. Like, and that was kind of like, that came to me during writing the early parts with Tracy in the story, because I was like, oh, like I knew he was gonna be instrumental in her story, but I didn't know what that would mean exactly and how that would play out. And, and I haven't figured out what to do with that next yet. So, he doesn't star in the next book, like the next book takes place like 2 years before Coward.
Do you think in some ways that like when you go into a book like this, I don't know, it reminds me of Mark Wade one time told me about how he doesn't know what the solution to a cliffhanger he sets up for himself is. Like
Oh, wow.
when he finishes on a cliffhanger, he's going to figure out after that. Do you kind of go in knowing the general direction that you want to take a character, but you have to like have their journey reveal itself to you as you're telling it in a way?
Yeah, I'll write. I usually, for that book, I think I wrote down about like 8 or 10 pages of stuff about each character, like, or well, not 8 or 10 about each character, but 8 or 10 pages of stuff that sort of detailed Jacob and Angie and uh Hyde's son, who's like the new Mr. Hyde in town, and and then Tracy, like I probably wrote about a page of stuff about Tracy and what his condition is when he arrives home, etc. And so I knew the basic movements of the story, but I always try to leave myself a lot of open space to make decisions on the page, and but especially this time because I didn't have a limit on my page count. It was very much like, like, oh, I'm just going to write these chapters as long as they need to be. That's why some of the chapters are like 50 or 60 pages long and some of them are like 20, you know.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't know. I've learned, the more I learn to just sort of trust myself. Like I would never, yeah, if I were doing that, like what Mark is doing, I could totally write a cliffhanger and assume I'm going to figure it out. But I've been writing these stories for long enough now too that I know that I leave myself like things in the, like, everything I write has so many like layers that if you look back, you're like, oh, that was about that. So it's like I can always see where I've left myself, like, oh, that means that this. But also, I feel like there's some kind of magic that happens sometimes when you're writing a story where you feel like you're leading towards something and you don't know how the hell you're going to resolve it or what is going to happen here, and then you're like, oh, that thing from earlier, oh, that can tie in, oh yeah, that's perfect. And like this just happened on the movie script for Reckless, actually, that I'm working on right now. um and just like having suddenly like all these little pieces like collide together and you're like, oh, that was perfect, almost as if it was planned. And so I feel like after you write enough stuff, like subconsciously you can kind of, your brain is moving the stuff around even when you don't realize you're doing it. Because sometimes I'm
Well,
laboring over a thing and then I'm like, wait, it's right here. Why am I cutting this? It's I said it in the last paragraph. So it's just,
I do think that that's the interesting thing, because it's like you can make connections that you're like, oh, this fits perfectly. I didn't plan it that way, but it's like it just kind of naturally comes around. I don't want to talk about the specifics about it, but when I was rereading the book last night, there was one scene in the first chapter where a character in the background has a look of like kind of disgruntledness.
yeah.
And Sean drew it in a way that I was just like, I didn't notice it the first time. And I noticed it the second time and I was like, oh man, this adds up. This is crazy.
I actually put that in the script to have that character giving that look, but to have it be a thing that we barely notice, that if you
Mm-hmm.
went back and looked at it a second time, you'd notice. Like that's literally what I wrote in the script. Like a little bit of shade, but not so much shade that we pay attention. So that one was planned. Yeah.
In your afterword, you talk about how the suitcase was one of like I think it was your uncle's suitcase, right?
Yeah.
How did that lead to this?
Um, well, so my aunt Sarah Jane was married to my uncle John Paxton, who was a famous screenwriter in Hollywood in the 40s and 50s. He wrote The Wild One and On the Beach and Murder My Sweet and a bunch of movies. His last feature that he wrote was this thing called Koch that Walter Matthau starred in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when she was older, like in her late 90s, she had a bunch of people like sort of like take advantage of her, like just elder abuse kind of situations. And my brother and I and my dad tried to like help her and get her away from these people. And it was just this really messed up thing that happened. And as that was happening, my dad he was diagnosed with terminal cancer and died during that whole thing. And so it's like this really sort of PTSD thing for me. And I got this really nice email from Eddie Muller one day, and some friend of his had come into possession of some of my uncle's property and these cool old suitcases that he had that were like those old hard shell suitcases. And they were on his shelves. He had them like in this, it's hard to describe, but basically you open them and you could make like a little shelf, and it had like two shelves to put books on. And so they were like, it was like a traveling bookcase basically. And so this had come into some friend of Eddie's possession, and he reached out to Eddie knowing that John was like a famous noir screenwriter, that Eddie might know somebody from the family or whatever. And so Eddie wrote to me to see if I wanted this thing. And I wrote back, it just triggered me in a really, I hate the word triggered, but it just made me I went off. Like I wrote back to him, and I was so, because the email he'd forwarded to me from the guy played up this woman who had taken advantage of my aunt as if she was this hero who had helped my aunt
Mm.
her hardest years. And I was just like, oh man, everybody's got their own agenda. And so I wrote back and just said, well, you can tell your friend that his friend was actually the villain. My aunt eventually had to be removed from her custody. And so it just, I wrote back and and I was like, but you gave me an idea for a book. And so there's like an elder abuse angle in the book, obviously. In that first chapter, there's some stuff about that, the aunt. But most of what happens to that aunt obviously is fiction.
Right, right.
But yeah, that was kind of the inspiration for it, was just that weird, like her estate kind of got taken apart and sold to the, and just sort of stolen and picked at by vultures and stuff. And so hearing from somebody, like, the only thing I managed to get before they disappeared was all of my uncle's old bound screenplays.
Mhm.
Everything else that they owned basically was like disappeared. And it was a really huge learning. I mean, this happened 20 years ago, or 15 years ago at this point. But the stuff like that just sticks with you, and you realize, like, oh, I'm still angry. So
Yeah.
there was some hate in that initial part of the book. And then I realized, like, and that's, thinking, it made me go back to sort of reliving my dad's last days, too, which was kind of fucked up. So, so I poured all that into a book, because that's what I usually do, because I don't go to therapy.
Are you ever surprised by, I mean, like, Houses Unholy is built on like the satanic panic
Yeah.
stuff that you were like, you lived through. Like, it was like a moment in time that you were a part of. There's all kinds of stuff in Reckless that kind of
Yeah.
is built from your own experiences and everything like that. Are you ever surprised by what makes its way into your own books?
Yeah. Yeah, there was some stuff in Kill or Be Killed that I didn't think I'd ever write about, like childhood sex abuse and stuff that, like, I don't know. I think I spent like the vast majority of my career writing about child abuse without ever getting any very close to the kind of stuff that actually happened to me when I was a kid.
Hmm.
So, like, and once that was down on the page and I was looking at it, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm writing about this now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't know. Yeah, I have been, especially Sean and I, like, the way we work is so instinctive at this point that, like, I know what I'm going to write about usually, but there's every scene that I've written in the last, several years for him has something where I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be in there.
Yeah.
So, I'm at this point, like, practically just a gardener. Like, if you, like, the outline for the Ricky book, I'm looking at it right now, is like 4 pages. And the first chapter is 38 pages long or something, and has like a 1 paragraph outline.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I feel like, but now I'm just so deep into the groove of it that it's just like if I run into a problem in a story, I'll always stop and take out my notebook and spend a few days walking around, trying to figure out a way to fix it. And, sometimes I have to go back and rewrite some stuff and change some stuff to make it work. But generally I try to, just keep moving forward and write, a few hours every day, like every morning. Still, like, I try to, there are some crazy weeks during production where I wasn't able to write except for on weekends. But never a whole week goes by that I haven't written some pages for Sean, at least.
Yeah.
It's really the thing that sort of keeps me feeling like in touch with my own voice, I think.
I imagine, like, without you even thinking about it, or maybe I'm just thinking too much about it myself, that maybe it's easier to write about things you wouldn't with other people because you and Sean have been doing this for so long. Like, it's like you trust that he's going to be able to execute it in the way that will do it justice. And I just want to say, we haven't really talked about Sean so far. This is a very specific deep cut for me. I think the second panel of the book is one of the best things that Sean has ever drawn. It's the Jacob Kurtz looking out the window of the train. I don't know why. When I was looking at it yesterday, I was like, "Damn, he crushed this one panel. Sean killed it."
I mean, I think his art in this book, like, overall, is just insane. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's not a page in there there's not one thing on there that I'm like, oh, that's fucking amazing. But like that whole first chapter of Jacob going to Hollywood and like living at that apartment complex and everything, like that apartment complex is a real place that was like
Oh yeah.
street from where I lived when I first moved there. And I knew actor friends who would come and stay there during pilot season, which is a thing that doesn't exist anymore. Like, but yeah, Chief from Battlestar, Aaron Douglas, used to always come there every year, and we'd all get together, like me and him, and Will Wheaton lived across the street from me at the time, and so we'd always get together during pilot season with him, and it was like, yeah, all these out of town actors and from other countries would come in and audition for shows, like, and they'd live there for like a month and just audition for stuff, and if they got something, then they'd go rent a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved Becky, the person that Jacob remembered from his youth and everything
Yeah.
like that. The funny thing about that is that's just like an archetype that you could kind of fill in with anybody. Like you're talking about Chief from Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
No offense, Aaron,
Yeah.
Aaron, but it's just like you can envision that person in your head because everyone's kind of got that Becky in their life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the person who lived next door to me when I first moved down there was like a woman who did music for Sesame Street when she was starting out, and became a person who wrote theme song music for sitcoms in the 80s and did like sitcom music. Like she did like Webster and stuff. And she was like, yeah, I like doing music for sitcoms because you never got notes. But like it was like I was living like a block away from Disney, and like there was just like, almost everybody who worked on my streets worked somehow in the industry, either like as an accountant or a producer or, and it was just like, oh wow, okay. It really felt like I moved to a factory town and everyone worked for the factory. And I live in Silver Lake now, and like I see like Mike Mills walking his dog on the street and stuff, and it's weird. Like one of the Sklar brothers once helped my wife and I save a baby squirrel, and we didn't discuss that he was one of the Sklar brothers at all. But it's just like, it's weird when you lived in LA for long enough that you just stop paying attention to celebrities. I was like, oh, okay, so those are just people who work a job.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This October, Oni Press and Spectre Vision are proud to present High Strangeness, a startling new 5-part experiment in comic book storytelling. Inspired by first-hand accounts of real paranormal encounters within the dimly lit borderlands of human experience, each 40-page prestige format chapter of High Strangeness will interrogate overlapping phenomena like UFOs, hauntings, and cryptid sightings that together seem to indicate a higher, unseen order of reality. Teaming Spectre Vision co-founder and real-life experiencer Daniel Noah with an otherworldly cast of comics talents including Christopher Cantwell, Cecil Castellucci, Christian Ward, and more. High Strangeness Book 1 arrives on October 8th to investigate a 1967 encounter with the strange beings known as the Men in Black from Noah, superstar writer Chris Condon, Ringo Award-winning artist Dave Chisholm, and cover artist Jock. Look for High Strangeness Book 1 on shelves October 8th at a local comic shop near you. And now, back to the show. That's got to be one of like the quirks of the entire experience. I really enjoyed all the stuff he did with Hollywood in there, but I do two quick things I want to bring up with Sean really quick. I love how he did the art for Basil Beaver with Private Eye. I thought he did an amazing job on that. And there's this 3-panel sequence where Jacob reads the scripts for Frank Kafka and realizes how different they are from the comic strip. And there's just this eye that pops up, and it is so goddamn perfect, Ed. It is unbelievable. Sean killed it. Good job, Sean. Good job, Jacob.
Yeah, no, those guys really did kill it. Yeah, the weird comic that Jacob does. So you liked that? I was like, what are people going to think about Jacob becoming a funny animal artist? That's so weird.
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great. I mean, why not? He's going into this different phase in his life.
Originally, I knew he was going to go back to doing a comic. But then when I was writing the story and he's like making fun of the guy by drawing him as a beaver or a rat or a weasel or whatever.
What was it? Was it a weasel? I think it was something like that. Yeah. It's a bit more graphic than Basil Beaver was.
Yeah. Yeah. But I suddenly liked the idea that he figured out a way to express himself again on paper, and that he really just wanted to do that. And I think that idea of like Jacob just being happy to just sit and do the smallest version of his cartoonist dream like that to me is like one of the hearts of the whole story, is really about that, like about how like the older you get, the sort of more your ambition goes from like this to like this, as like this can still feel incredibly ambitious as long as I have the freedom to do the exact creative thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like I don't need a million people reading a thing if it's what I want it to be. And it's like it really takes a long time as a creator for you to get there where you suddenly are like, I just care about the work. I don't really the success part of it. Like I feel like so many creative artists, we spend so much of our lives thinking about success and chasing success while also trying to chase art at the same time. And it really like, you know, it can really get in your head. So I like the idea that Jacob had this moment in Hollywood and made him realize like, you know what? I'm I'm actually pretty happy just sitting in an art studio drawing a comic for myself, you know.
I mean, I'm not saying that you're gonna give up Hollywood immediately, especially because you're just finishing up a show. But like, is that something you ever feel like when you come back to comics? Do you kind of feel like this is nice?
Oh, always. I mean, comics is the best. Like comics is I mean, I'm not a novelist, so I don't know. I would imagine being a novelist feels pretty freeing too, but yeah, just writing the scripts and sending them to Sean or sending them to Marcos. Like I work with, you know, two artists that I trust implicitly with my scripts, and you know that they're going to draw it really great, and you know, I have total control of, you know, like me and Sean design those books. Like Sean designs them, I give him some feedback. Like, you know, it's like Marcos designs everything. We have total creative control of everything we do. And so like for me, if the worst version of this show had happened where it was like a thing, I was like, well, I don't love it, but I'm sure 50 million people will watch it. I'd still be okay with that. I just wouldn't spend more years of my life trying to like work on it because it wouldn't be like I'd be like, well, anybody can do that, you know.
Right.
If it's gonna be a thing I care about, then I have to do it. But yeah, I ultimately, you know, I mean, no one stays working in Hollywood forever. It's that job is for young people. like
Yeah.
like I've, you know, I could probably do this for another 10 or 12 years or so, but then I can't imagine, you know, being, you know, much older and trying to like deal with that. Though, you know, you maybe get to a level where it's much easier because you're, you know, you've been around doing it for so long that you've got like the streamlined version like I get with comics, you know. So like I had a much easier time in comics coming up through Marvel and DC than a lot of people did too, though. But because I just sort of do my own thing and usually it's does okay, and the editors just are kind of like, yeah, he does his own thing. You know, so I'm starting to get to that point in Hollywood where people realize that it's better to sort of trust me and let me do my thing. And you know, if I can keep doing that, then great. But you know, this industry is constantly changing. Like the Hollywood that I started working in like 20 years ago when I sold my first TV pilot or whatever, and like 19 or 20 years ago, like that was a completely different animal than what we have now. Now we work in a tech industry, basically.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure like why how any of these streamers are making money other than Netflix, you know, like which is just subscribers and they just make a TV show. Like but like I don't know, like this market doesn't make a ton of sense to me, and like everybody in the industry, we all are kind of looking around and going like, you know, this was a really normal, successful, profitable industry for like 80 years. Like Sigourney Weaver's dad invented television. When you want to talk about nepo babies, by the way, the most talented actors of her entire life, like generation. But her dad invented the Tonight Show and the Today Show and the idea of the sitcom. Those are all still really things that could be really profitable and good. But we spent the last 10 years just sort of destroying uh, sort of a sensible, profitable industry that everyone understood how it worked and the systems that were in place that made a lot of sense. And now, like I talked to somebody who worked on The Pit, and they were saying like the streamer is trying to figure out how to get it out so quickly. And I was like, guys, you guys used to do 25 episodes a year, and there'd be 3 months off, and then it would start again.
Yeah.
Now you can't figure out how to get 8 episodes on without a 3-year gap in between. It's like the Pit's doing 15 episodes, and like the Warner Brothers people are like, this is too much work. We used to do, like, network TV still does 25 episodes a year for a lot of shows, like FBI or all those CBS shows. So it's really weird. I feel like they just sort of, initially I thought it was really just a 10-year path to sort of take us back to cable TV, but through streamers, and just to get rid of the residuals for the creatives, like,
Yeah.
because they really changed that part of it. But now I really just feel like they don't really, like, there wasn't much of a plan, because to do that, you would still need to put out like 10 to 20 something episodes a year if you're recreating the old television system. But yeah, everybody's stuck at like 6 to 8 episodes now for everything. And,
I do.
everything's more expensive too. So
I mean, it does seem like it's about the pursuit of new. And it's funny how, like, you have, like, you brought up the Pit. The Pit just had its the second season trailer hit, and people are like, "What is this witchcraft? How did they come out with another season already when, like, the first season just came out this year, basically?"
yeah.
Or, like, one of my favorite shows is Slow Horses on
Oh,
Apple
I love
TV Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. But, like, they're like
They
bringing out the seasons like crazy. I mean, it's like basically 2 seasons a year since it premiered. I mean, there have been like 6 seasons in between seasons of Wednesday.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. They have that
it's
trailer for the next thing, like the next season at the end of the season you just finished. So you're like, oh, great. They've already, it's just like this incentive to keep hooked.
yeah.
Really?
I mean, and they're only 6-episode seasons, but at the same time, it's just like when they're constantly coming and they're always so good. It's just,
It feels substantial though. Like,
yeah.
is a lot. Like 6 episodes and it's a British model more, like, but British TV will do 3-episode seasons depending on the show. So,
And they're like movie length at times
yeah,
too.
exactly. But yeah, no, I love that show. That was, Amelia and I would rave about that show when the last season was on while we were filming. She and I would talk about that when we got back to work every Monday.
It's, Amelia Clark, you got great taste. I do think it's funny though, because, like, you brought up Caliber earlier when you were talking about living with Brian, and it's like, it is fascinating to think about how much comics has changed too, because, like, you came up, you were writing and drawing comics for like a publisher that doesn't exist anymore, and then you get into Marvel and DC for this really, or you get Marvel in particular for like a really strong time for the comic industry. And then you move over to Image right at the right time when it's really blowing up. And, like, since then, you've kind of gotten to a point where you are extremely stable in a market that's super weird for original comics quite often. And it is interesting to think about, like, how in a lot of ways comics haven't changed, but it's also just like always, like, you can look 5 years at a time and it's just dramatically different, like what options are available to people. And
Well, yeah, like, we're doing our first single issue thing. We're putting out a criminal Christmas special this December, like a 48-page magazine. It's going to be on that newsprint interior stuff that Jake used for his Western comic, the Enfield Gang Massacre. Like, Sean and I really loved that paper. So we're having like a one with like a matte finish cover and newsprint insides. And that's our first single issue since when we did Criminal last time before the pandemic.
was that the bigger one or the single issue one? Like, because you did the magazine ones.
We did magazines, but those were a long time ago. Those are like over 10 years ago, like those. And that was like the 10th anniversary special. Yeah, no, so that was almost 10 years ago was the last one. This is just going to be a comic-sized thing, but 48 pages. But, like, we were just going to do it with a single cover. And then I was out to dinner with Kirkman, and he just rode me about, like, look, dude, even I do variant covers now. He's like, if you want to, he's like, you've got a TV show about to come out and you're going to put out a comic, like, dude, give retailers some incentive to keep it in stock. And I was like, all right. So we got like Marcos and a couple other people to volunteer to do variants for us for the first time. But that's the first time Criminal's ever had like a variant cover, because this has just become, and I realized, like, Taylor fucking Swift does variant covers of records. And I'm like,
right.
Okay, this is just a thing that people in physical media do to survive now. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, we're not doing that on our books.
Right.
But like, that's the one advantage of only doing graphic novels. But yeah, I I always feel very lucky in, for a long time, Bendis and I would joke about how we arrived everywhere like 5 years too late for the gold rush. But like, I don't know how it happened, but like Sean and I just continuing to put out comics, like we developed a readership, and among them are comic book retailers. So like when we put out a new book, like it's an event for people, and like we can disappear for a year and come back with a book, and the book will still sell great, and comic book stores like us, and like, but we built that, and like this December thing too, if you're a comic book retailer listening, this is a print only single issue that is only available through comic stores. I
Mhm.
am trying to, one of my goals for Criminal around the TV show is to continually try to create things that benefit the comics market specifically, because I grew up in comic book stores, but also like, you know, comic book stores out there, there's still some out there from when we launched Criminal. They'll remember that, like, when we first started the book, I used to do these big mass mailings myself that my wife and I and my friends Duffy and Caitlin would stuff envelopes with homemade, with posters that we would print. And I would write a letter and sign it to every retailer, like basically like begging them to support this book and give it a chance, and telling them about like what kind of publicity we were trying to get. And I really did like serious, like one-to-one outreach with retailers, and I mailed them myself. Like I didn't send it through the publisher or anything. It was all just direct from that's where From the Desk of Ed Brubaker started. It was like that was stamped on the outside of those envelopes. It was so that retailers would not throw it away immediately. Oh, oh, the guy who writes Captain America. Okay, I'll open this.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was like trying to take advantage of, Sean had just done Marvel Zombies, and I was doing Captain America, which was the biggest, Captain America run since, 20 years or something. And, so I was like, all right, I'm going to try and really do this. And, the retailers just supported the fuck out of it. Like they really came through for us, and they've always been our biggest supporters. And, like we sell half of our print runs through the comic stores and the rest through, select various online places like Amazon, and the book market we do okay in and stuff. But the comics market is still, our biggest customer and our biggest supporter. And so like I've been trying to figure out like more things that we can do to just sort of give comic stores a thing that they're the only ones that have. And I was like, okay. And I hate digital, so I was just like, let's digital now at this point. Like, how many lawsuits am I like part of now to sue AI for fucking scraping all of our work and stuff? And I just am like, "Ugh, they're too lazy to take pictures of it anymore. We just give them these pirate things. We made it way easy to pirate our work,
Mhm.
by selling digital versions of it. And I just prefer like physical media for things like, like why should comics not be physical? So I was like, let's make a thing that's physical media only, only for comic stores. Let's reward comic stores, and so we're doing that. And that's partly in hopes that they buy a lot so that they have it in stock when the show comes out too, of like, hey, I've got this thing that you can only get here, you know
Well, I also wanna say that, like, uh I have to compliment you because I think that you all have done a really good job of making this all really easy on readers and retailers. And I'm gonna list off a few ways. One, I love the new collections of Criminal and how there's like uniform branding on it. And like like you talked about Sean designing all of that. Something like My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies, when that came out,
yeah,
that had no Criminal branding on it. This is the first time it's ever had that, and it's all uniform. So all the big old nerds out there like me who want to see their
yeah,
spines line up and stuff like that. It's perfect. It's
they have
great.
numbers because Kirkman just bugged me forever to
I like how like Kirkman's just nagging you to do things
he's
basically.
yeah he's like he's one of my best friends, but also like like
He
I'm
knows what's up.
obstinate about stuff. I have left a lot of money on the table in our career over the years by me and Sean being obstinate about like, no, we just want to do it this way. Like, and Robert was like, you've got a window here. Don't be your own worst enemy here. Like, don't be such a snob that you prevent yourself from actually profiting off of your TV show. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, and the other thing you all have going too is you have a back catalog in a market, like a uniform back catalog in a market where a lot of people don't have that depth.
Yeah,
And all, I mean, to tie into the slow horses of it all, you guys are kind of like comic book slow horses in that you
yeah,
always have something coming out.
yeah,
And so like you can have like Killer Be Killed and Fatale both had compendiums in the last couple
yeah,
years.
yeah.
And then there's I think we've talked about this a little privately, but there's like the whole format boom going on where like things are coming out in digest and things are coming out in compendiums
Yeah,
and
I think
stuff
we're
like
gonna
that.
try the smaller size for the Reckless paperbacks, actually.
And I think that that would be great because like
'Cause the
you
hardback-
originally wanted it to be like the airport novel sale, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially if that movie ends up going, so that would be great.
But I think that you present a lot of options to readers and retailers, and you give like the thing is like what happens whenever you finish a TV show? It wants to start the next one. When you finish a Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips book, you have a list of books you can read next, and I
Yeah,
think that that is really powerful.
yeah. Eric Stevenson was really helpful. Our backlist moves a lot better than it used to. We used to just have a list of titles at the end.
Yeah.
Was like, that's impressive. But Eric's like, if you had like a little catalog at the end of the books, like 3 or 4 pages where you showed these covers, people would be more interested. And so we did that, and it was like, oh, and that's when I hired you to do that. The intro,
Neo noir.
yeah, which I want to do. I want to do something. We need to add more to it, basically. But I want to try and do something like that. When I saw Chip doing the Zdarsky comic news, I looked at that format and I asked him how much it cost. I'm like, oh, I could print a bunch of just like criminal catalog, like,
Oh yeah.
and just send that to every retailer. Just send like a stack to every retailer for free. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, there's so many options of ways to do it. But yeah, I've been really trying to get ahead of the curve on making sure we had everything in stock when the show launches and that it's all very accessible to retailers. And, you know, I don't know if it's different than what other people do now, but when Sean and I first started, like one of our big goals was to just be new reader friendly constantly and to be a thing. Like I jokingly always said when I was doing Catwoman at DC, I was we did books that comic fans could give their girlfriends was how we said it. And when I did Scene of the Crime, it was like I would hear from people like, oh, I gave this to my dad for Christmas. And so I was like, oh, we're doing dad books or we're doing girlfriend books or, like our stuff isn't necessarily aimed at like a superhero fan, but now I just sort of feel like the fact that we've constantly just tried to do things that interest ourselves, but that also feel like every package you get is worth your time and money, hopefully. Like we put together nice packages, we don't leave you with a cliffhanger. You generally get to the end of one of our books and hopefully you feel like you've got a complete satisfying story. And like now we just have such a huge catalog. We've got like 40 or 50 books in print at this point, and it's kind of insane. It's hard to keep up with. That part of it is daunting. Like the putting out the new books is easy, but keeping the old ones in print and viable and wondering, I'm so happy to have these single edition versions of Fatale and Killer Be Killed. I kind of want to let the smaller versions go out of print and just have a single book because it's so much easier to keep it in print.
Do you think that those I mean it's very hard to say. You just
Yeah.
like know how much they've sold, but do you think that those types of books and having those other formats have helped you kind of uncover people who know, because like here's a good example. My nephew will not read something that's not read a comic unless it's a complete story.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. Do you think that it's helped unlock any new audience at all?
I think so. I think also like reformatting stuff and different editions always gives you a chance to grab somebody new because, we're all comic people. Like if I've
Yeah.
missed the first issue of something, like I went to the comic store the other day and I was trying to find, uh, what is that book? Random, it's the,
Assorted crisis
yeah, Assorted
events.
Crisis Events. Yeah, I was trying to find Assorted Crisis Events, and they just had issue 2. They said they couldn't keep it in stock, and so I was like, and he's like, well, issue 2 sort of stands on its own. I was like, okay, and I started thumbing through issue 2. I'm like, I think I need to read issue 1 first. A couple people have told me it won't help Like, as far as you really have to put a lot of work into figuring out what's happening. I was like, they were like, issue 1 isn't necessarily like the origin, and I was like, oh, okay. But I still, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like when I go to the stores, I always want to get, like, if I miss the first issue, it's hard to follow a thing. Like, that's part of why I didn't want numbers on Criminal originally, because they're all standalone books. You can start with volume 6. In fact, volume 6 is a lot of people's favorite one because it's not connected to any of the other ones at all. It's just like, what happens if Archie grows up?
Yeah.
Criminal, you know? And it's like, but that was a book where, Roberto gave it to all of his writers on the Riverdale show as like, this is, something you guys all should look at because it's a crazy take on Archie. I'm like, yeah, it's my version.
I think the funny thing about that is I remember maybe this is because you didn't have volume numbers, but I remember all the criminal arcs based off of their name. Like, when you say volume 6, I'm like, Last of the Innocent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's still how it's interesting. We have the numbers now, but we're still branding them, with the title on the cover like that. So, and Sean gets to do a new logo for each book then that way too, like a double logo kind of. So yeah, that was really hard to crack, like how to do the criminal branding, in a really bold way, but that also left us enough room for, especially on the ones where I started getting really wordy with the titles. Like, holy shit, it took forever to figure out how to do that Junkies cover. Like, the logo covers her in the entire cover.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
The cover definitely looks a fair bit different than the other ones because it is like completely across her face.
Yeah.
But I think Sean did a great job with it.
Oh yeah, no, that is one of my favorite ones for the new redesigns, actually. Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy to think that by the time when the show started, we had 10 books. Now the 11th book is coming out on Wednesday, and it's when that goes out of print, we'll put out the paperback version with the criminal branding across the top. And, so that's like the plan for the criminal hardbacks, is you just do like the one printing in hardback, and and then we'll do more deluxe editions for the future stuff too.
Well, no matter what format it's coming in, I'm excited about it. But Ed, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Criminal, the show, the comic, the whatever. I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.